I became an attorney at a time when the only thing that anybody in law school ever said about marketing or advertising was don't do it, it's unethical. That was it. That's what I learned about all of this. And even though decades ago I opened my own law firm, right? You would think that I would have to learn about marketing and branding and advertising then. The truth is, I didn't. Because as a lawyer, people would come to me, they already knew they had a problem. They already knew I could fix the problem. The only question in their mind was, is it you or the person down the hall? Right? So that was an entirely different experience and business than going into divorce coaching, which most people don't even know it's a thing, right? So all of a sudden, branding became critically important.
Hi, this is Sue Kirchner with Brand Strong Marketing, and I have another wonderful guest today on Turbo Branding. As always, we're going to be talking about how to ignite your growth by leveraging the brand to grow faster, easier, and more successfully. But first, I want to introduce you to my friend, Karen Covy, who has a very unique brand. And I'm going to share a few sentences about her background, but then I'll let her tell you more as she shares her stories about branding. But first, Karen is a divorce coach, lawyer, mediator, speaker, and author. She coaches busy professionals and business owners nationwide to make clear, confident decisions during very emotional situations. She helps her clients either restructure their marriage or become the CEOs of their own divorce so they can navigate through the process with less conflict, less expense, and less damage to themselves and their children. And Karen's also an author. She's written several books. When Happily Ever After Ends, How to Survive Your Divorce Emotionally, Financially, and Legally. And she's also the creator of the Divorce Roadmap 2.0 and How to Successfully Mediate Your Divorce. Finally, she's the host of the podcast Off the Fence, which I highly recommend everybody take a look at. So all of that is super impressive. So welcome, Karen. Is there anything you would like to add to that introduction?
No, you've said it all. That was amazing. Thank you so much for the kind introduction.
No problem at all. So, well, I can't wait to hear your branding journey, and thank you for sharing that with us today. So let's jump right in. So Karen, I have been really intrigued by how you rebranded and changed your business, I believe 10 years ago, from being a divorce attorney to being a divorce coach. Why did you do that? And then how did you make that transition?
Okay, so it was a confluence of two things, personal and professional. On a professional level, I realized, and actually I had a secretary at the time who helped me to realize that not all attorneys practice law the way I did, and that there was a huge gap in the market between what people thought their attorney was going to do and what their attorney was really going to do, right? And because of that gap, I saw people falling in and falling off a cliff, so to speak, making bad decisions and doing things that ultimately ended up hurting themselves and their kids without ever intending that. So, from a professional level, I said, this is ridiculous. Somebody should fix this. Somebody should work on it. And I knew as one person, I was never going to change the divorce system. Like that's a little bit too big for me at this stage in life. However, I could fix the people going into it. And the more people I could reach, the more good that I could do. So that was the professional reason. And on a personal reason, personal front at the same time, I was looking for geographical freedom because as a lawyer, I'm tied to the state of Illinois, but realistically to the counties that I can physically be in, right? Because I can't practice all over the state of Illinois. And so I was looking for a way to reach more people and not be stuck just going to one or two or three courthouses in, a limited area.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, a question I have for you is, as a service-based business, which is what you're doing, and a lot of my clients are service-based businesses, a lot of stuff comes down to the decision to work with you or not on trust, right? And especially with these emotionally charged situations that I'm, assuming you deal with every day, trust has to be big. So how important is branding then for your business?
Oh, branding is huge. And let me just be clear about something, okay? I've been in this space for a very long time.
Mhm.
I became an attorney at a time when the only thing that anybody in law school ever said about marketing or advertising was don't do it, it's unethical. That
Mm.
was it. That's what I learned about all of this. And even though decades ago I opened my own law firm, right? You would think that I would have to learn about marketing and branding and advertising then. The truth is, I didn't.
Yeah.
Because as a lawyer, people would come to me, they already knew they had a problem. They already knew I could fix the problem. The only question in their mind was, is it you or the person down the hall? Right? So that was an entirely different experience and business than going into divorce coaching, which most people don't even know it's a thing.
Right.
Right? So all of a sudden, branding became critically important. And the trust factor that you mentioned, that's a giant part of branding. Now, why should people trust me or trust you or trust anybody? And part of that is, to me, branding is deciding who you are, what you want to stand for, what are your values, and then finding a way to convey that to the general public so that they do trust you, right?
Yeah.
And that to me is what branding is about.
Right. Right. So another question for you is, I've heard you say in networking meetings, because I see you quite frequently, that you're a recovering lawyer. So how does that framing help you?
Well, the framing of being a lawyer, people know what a lawyer is, they know what a lawyer does, and it comes with some ready-made trust, so to speak,
Mhm.
right? It comes with a certain prestige, a certain amount of respect. And so I use the recovering lawyer very intentionally so people know that I'm not some person who just went to a weekend online course and learned about divorce coaching, right? That
Right.
is not my background. I have been doing this for decades in every way that there is to do it. So part of my branding was to intentionally pull that piece in, but I had to say recovering lawyer because I don't want to give people the wrong impression that they can come to me and I will represent them. That's not what I do anymore, right? So
Yeah.
I needed a differentiator. And plus, it's kind of cute. It's funny. It's
Yeah.
catching. People
Yeah.
remember that. And that's the point.
Yeah. No, it's definitely memorable when you're in a meeting and you say that. And like you said, you get a couple chuckles and, things like that. But I have clients who have a very unique niche. And for a while, it really helps to say what they are not, or to have another brand anchor that people do understand to compare it to. So I think you've made a pretty savvy decision to go ahead and at least, address your background and leverage all the equity that you built an attorney in the past. Okay. So I'm going to ask you too, what are some of the most important things you learned while building your brand?
Just do it. It's like Nike said, you just got to do it. I remember being paralyzed in the beginning because I didn't know what a brand was and I didn't know what I wanted to be and I didn't know how to describe it and I didn't know, like I knew conceptually what the service was, but there were so many, I had so many questions around it.
Yeah.
And really, if I could go back and talk to my younger self or talk to somebody else who was just starting out, I would say, pick something and just do it. See how it lands and iterate. I have had over the years so many taglines, so many approaches, so many things that I've tried, and not all of them have worked.
Yeah.
Some of them have been worked beautifully, and some of them have been huge flops. But it's about going, starting and doing something, being willing to take a risk, being willing to fail. And then if you fail, you're just like, okay, that's information and you iterate, right? Marketing, as far as I can tell, and you're the expert, but from what I've been able to learn, it is not an exact science, right?
Right.
You have
Right.
to try something, see if it works, and then if that doesn't, okay, right the ship, try something else, try something else. Eventually, if you keep going in the right general direction, you're going to get momentum and you're going to make progress. But if you sit there waiting for the perfect marketing slogan to fall from heaven into your lap, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, what has worked best for you? I mean, maybe start off with talking about, I love to talk to my clients or your potential clients about who is your ideal customer, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then what works best for you to get your message in front of those people.
I think for me, I love to write, I love to speak, right?
Mm,
So those things work for me. I would say to people, know what lights you up, know what you're good at, and then you can find the intersection of what you're good at and what your client needs and what they where they are, right? If
right.
your clients are all on social media and you're not, you're never going to find them, right? But for me, it's been a combination. When I started this journey a decade ago, I started with blogging because videos weren't as big of a thing,
Hmm.
right? They were hard to make, it was expensive. I did a couple of videos in a video shoot when I launched my business, but I've got to tell you, it cost me a small fortune and I got 3 2-minute videos out of it, and it took me a day,
Yeah.
right? So that was just crazy, and I couldn't do it myself. So I said that, I mean, it was just cost prohibitive. So
Yeah.
I started blogging. I learned SEO. I learned how to write. I learned copywriting. I started going and reaching people that way because that's where all the eyeballs were at the time. Now, not necessarily true. Yeah, people still find my articles all the time. However, they also see me on social media. They also see me on video. They also, a lot of people these days, they're on TikTok, they're on YouTube, they're on all of the different places. And the challenge is you cannot build everything all at once. You
Right.
have to pick something, find a lane, and exploit that lane. So, what I would say to anybody who is looking for what do I do? How do I build what you have? I didn't build it in a year. Okay. I didn't build it in a month. I
Right.
built it over several years. And I would say find the place where your ideal clients are at, someplace that you can connect with them and that you enjoy, because it is going to be a long haul. It is going to be a lot of work. And if
Right.
you hate it, you're not going to last. You're just going to be
Right.
like, I don't want to do that. Mm-mm-mm.
Right.
Right. So I love being on video, not a problem for me. I love writing, not a problem for me. So then if that's the situation you find yourself in, pick something. I
Right.
started a podcast, but I didn't start a podcast until a year and a half ago, right?
Right.
So I did a lot of things first and then started the podcast. Why? Because at that time I was doing all the other things. I didn't have the bandwidth to do it all, right? So the key is to do things sequentially, build
Hmm.
one thing, then build the next thing, then build the next thing, rather than scattershot, which is trying to do everything at once.
Yeah. No, that's smart. That's absolutely smart. Because you're right. As a small business owner, we only have so much time, energy, and resources to get our marketing message out there. And you're right. It's some of it's trial and error, but then when you hit on something that works, and as you said, you enjoy doing it,
Yeah.
then double down, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
that's excellent. So let me ask you a question just for people listening is how big is your company?
Me.
It's you, right?
It's me.
So
I
can
have a virtual assistant,
Mhm.
and let's be honest. All right, so I have a virtual assistant. I leverage AI whenever and wherever I can. And there are lots of ways to do that in marketing. And then I will, contract out projects if a project comes up. And of course, I have an accountant and, but still, as terms of the employees of the business, I have one employee, that's me.
Yeah, that's perfect. Same as I am. So, how much of your marketing would you say you do versus having to outsource to some of these people, this team that you've built to support you?
That's hard to say. That my team supports me in the back office, let's put it
Okay.
that way, right? So,
Yep.
for example, I have a podcast. I find the guests, I do the interviews, right? And so I am responsible for that part. But and I record the interviews because I record them like you are on Zoom, right?
Right.
That's pushing a button. That's not
Yep.
hard.
I can do
Then
that.
I upload the audio, and I have the capacity to add the bumpers to the audio myself, not
Hmm.
hard. But then my assistant does everything else. She's the one that takes it and uploads it to the podcast platform that
Platforms.
sends
Okay.
it out to everyone. She's the one now. I write the descriptions, but I
Okay.
use AI to help me, right?
Perfect.
And do I ever use what AI wrote, like just copy and paste? Absolutely not. It's not, I mean, it's just not that good yet.
Right.
Someday it probably will be. But
Right.
so I use AI to help with the descriptions, to help with the headlines. I make little video clips of every single episode. I don't sit there and watch every video and look for, oh, that would be a good clip. Oh, like, I don't have that kind of time.
Right. Right.
So a lot of it is leveraging the tools that are out there because they are ginormous time savers.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And what would you say, because you and I were talking about this offline a little bit too, is when did the podcast really pay off for you? Or when did you realize, yeah, this is working? This is totally worth my time?
The first time somebody called and said, "Hey, I heard your podcast. I heard you on the podcast," and not a friend. I don't mean friends and family. I
Right.
mean a person who I didn't know before, who was a potential client who heard the podcast. And I thought, whoa, I guess this is working, right?
Yeah.
And it's about, but here's the thing too, marketing the podcast matters. You can't just make this podcast and put the episodes out and hope that the podcast gods will smile on you and you'll get people listening. It doesn't work that way, right? And so when you're talking about what do I outsource as far as my marketing, the strategy, the planning, the creation of a lot of it, I do that. Why? Because I want it to work. And if it's not working, then I can say, okay, do that iterative process and say, maybe this will work. Maybe if I tweak this, maybe if I do that. And so I keep changing and learning and growing, but I do that. You can't outsource, I don't think. You can't outsource the thinking process. You can
Correct.
outsource the little doing. So you've got to be in and willing to do it. And it's great to work with a marketing person, somebody who can save you a ton of time because they have the experience that you don't,
Right.
but you can't outsource the thinking. You just
Right.
can't.
No, you can't. AI will never be innovative, right? And it will never be emotional. And when you're trying to, get across your brand and build trust with your clients and all that, there has to be some emotion in there. And it won't be able to do that. But I like what you were saying about, looking at back end or looking at some of the tasks. And I think that's one of the things that I know it took me forever to sit down and to do was to actually put together just a list of, okay, every time I do this marketing piece, whether it's writing a blog or whatever, write down all the steps. And then once you've got that, then you can see, all right, which one of these don't need me, right? Which one
Yeah.
of these can be outsourced to, as you said, an assistant, an outsourced writer, AI, whatever it is. But if you can understand where you're offering the most value to your own marketing, then it makes some of those decisions easier. And then you look at it as a process as opposed to a pain or as opposed to a big project that I gotta get this, blog post done or I have to get this video done. It's going to take me hours and things like that. If you know that you're only doing a piece of it, I think that makes it much easier to digest.
100%.
Mhm.
Because if you have that feeling of dread, like, oh, I have to do whatever it is that you think you have to do,
Right.
you're not going to want to do it. It's not going to be as good because you're going to be like dragging yourself to it. And it's going to
Right.
take forever,
Right.
right? So find the piece of that only you can do. Hopefully you enjoy doing that piece, and then you can outsource the rest. And as your business grows, as my business has grown, I've outsourced more because you grow to the point where number one, you have more to do, and number two, you have the funds to do it with. But you
Right.
can't run before you can walk.
Right. No, exactly. And I mean, you hear this all the time when you start your own business, and especially if you're a small, solopreneur or a small firm, is you hear this, there comes a point where you can't do everything and you have to outsource it. And I heard the term the other day of you need to buy back your time. And by buying back your time is you're paying someone else to do it so that you can put more of your time into the value added activities or new business development or whatever it else, that you as the owner, as the face of the company, need to do. So,
Yeah,
no, all
you
of
have
that.
to do the things only you can do.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm going to ask you another question, and maybe you haven't thought about it yet, or maybe you have, but you've talked about, tackling your marketing activities sequentially or building upon each other.
Mhm.
Is there something you would love to do marketing wise that you just haven't got to yet?
Oh, I would love to build out a second episode of the podcast. I have an idea in mind. I just haven't had the bandwidth to build it out. And I don't want to do something half-heartedly, right? But I have an idea where, I want to start publishing 2 episodes of the podcast a week instead of one,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
And the other right now, and here's the other thing for people who are thinking of podcasting, you have to figure out on the back end what's your point, what's your purpose, what's the problem you're trying to solve with the podcast, right? So, do you want an interview-based podcast? Do you want just a here, I'm talking to you podcast? Do you want long form? Do you want video included? What is it that you want, and what is it supposed to accomplish, right? And
Right.
so I very purposefully wanted an interview-based podcast. But what I'm thinking of with the second episode is to run something that's just me,
Okay.
right? That's
Yeah.
smaller and just me. But even still, it's that second round of processing that I've got to look at and say, okay, at what point do I A, have enough content ideas to make this make sense?
Right.
And B, am willing to commit the extra resources. And yes, I will get some economies of scale, right? Where I can,
Yeah.
it won't be hugely different than what I'm doing, but it still is going to be more. So, and I don't want to do it badly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, I hear
that's
you.
my marketing dream.
No, I love that. I love that. Well, just for our listeners, can you tell them just a little bit about what your current podcast is? It's off the fence, but who should listen? When should they listen? That kind of thing. So,
So my podcast is named Off the Fence, and it is about what it sounds like, about getting off the fence, not just in terms of do I get married or do I stay married or do I get a divorce, but it's decision making.
mm,
So I tackle difficult decision making in tough emotional situations in a variety of contexts. I've had people on the show who are HR people
mhm,
because employment decisions, do I hire or fire this person? Do I take this job or not? What do I do? Those are very emotional decisions. They can be tough. People get stuck there a lot. People get stuck in the do I stay or do I leave my marriage decision. But I also look at divorce in terms of decision making because
mhm.
do I stay or do I go? That's just your first decision. You're going to have to make so many life-changing decisions if you walk down the path of divorce, like more than in any other similar time period. So learning, giving people structure on how to make those decisions and talking to people in different contexts who have lived that in different ways is very, very helpful. So the podcast itself is focused primarily on divorce, but it is more broad than that. It's about relationships, it's about jobs, it's about making difficult decisions, right?
Yeah.
So that's the podcast. We come out every week. You can find it on every place where people listen to podcasts. And of course, I'm going to tell you, you should listen every week. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is. I've listened to many of them and they are fascinating. So that's great. Well, if people want to hire you as a coach or learn more about you, where should they go?
They should go to my website, karencovy.com. That's KarenCovy.com. There is no E in my version of Covey. Otherwise, I'd be like related to somebody really famous and I wouldn't have to do all this stuff for a living.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, well, anyway, Karen, thank you so much for spending time with me today and sharing your branding stories and your marketing stories and your insights about how to grow your business. I really appreciate that. And I would just say, yeah, thank you again for your time. And
Thank
to
you.
yeah, and to everybody listening, thank you as well. And I hope you've been inspired to ignite your growth by leveraging your brand.